Hello everybody, Senior Engineer, MBA, and investor. And in today's video, I want to talk about this podcast episode, which obviously is probably in the top 10, top 5 at this point. Definitely was the top podcaster in the mid 2010s. And of course, I'm talking about Tim Ferriss. Obviously, Joe Rogan, Lex Fridman, and everybody else came along after that and took over, probably knocked him off his top spot, but he was definitely the biggest show at the time, and he's also admitted that he's fallen back in the rankings, through podcast ranking episodes. But of course, this is not the point of this video. The point of this video is actually he brought up a guest, which we've talked about this guest in the past. CEO, founder of Coinbase, none other than Brian Armstrong. He interviewed Brian Armstrong on the October 7th. I was hearing the podcast episode while driving back from Montreal to Toronto. So yes, I'm back in Toronto for those who are curious. And basically this episode was full of content. Of course, talking about crypto, talking about Bitcoin, talking about a bunch of stuff there. But most importantly, Brian Armstrong revealed that he had a couple of investments in biotechs. And there's a new company he invested in called New Limit, I believe. And this company is basically in the biotech space. It's basically, as you can see in the screen here, epigenetic reprogramming, right? So what that means, obviously we've made many videos in the past here about this type of topic. That's not really what I wanted to dive into. I think what I wanted to actually talk about is how CRISPR is now surfacing in the landscape, in the front mainstream, right? And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because somewhere in this episode, Brian Armstrong started talking about his company and then actually started talking about CRISPR. He actually mentioned genome editing, CRISPR. He actually said the word CRISPR. And I find that really interesting because rewind 5 years ago, there was no way you would have heard the word CRISPR on Tim Ferriss' podcast. I mean, Ferriss did bring, the book of genome editing, CRISPR, and Dr. Doudna from Walter Isaacson. So he did bring the author there. So it's not like it's the first time he's bringing up someone who talks about CRISPR. But I just found it really interesting that, someone who's absolutely not in the space of CRISPR or biotech. I think most of you would agree. If you think of Brian Armstrong, you think of Coinbase, you think of crypto, you think of Bitcoin. There's no way you're thinking of CRISPR, right? But it's really interesting that Brian Armstrong, he talks about how he's taking like biology, lessons there from a tutor, and now he's trying to accelerate his knowledge about biotech and biology as a whole because of everything we just talked about, genome editing, and of course the company he's now invested in, New Limit, I believe. I think it's New Limit. I'm not sure if I don't recall the specific name, but it has to be New Limit. But regardless what the name is, it's really interesting that we're talking about this in today's era. I think it is worth pausing for a second and seeing where we are right now. The market crash, there's a recession, Ukraine invasion, there's lots of macros environment. But in terms of science, when it comes to genomics, when it comes to CRISPR, everything points in the right exact direction as we should be going. We're getting data, we're getting amazing data, we're getting average data for some cases, but we're getting data. We're getting companies that never dose patients to dose patients this year and hopefully get data next year. And of course, we have a potential FDA approval pending for CTX001, of course, from CRISPR Therapeutics and Vertex, which we've mentioned many times in this channel. So lots of things are happening. Good things are happening. You see Armstrong, who's a software engineer that has absolutely nothing to do with CRISPR, is mentioning CRISPR on a podcast such as Tim Ferriss, which is a very obviously popular podcast. So lots of things going on, guys. I just wanted to bring this up. I was listening to this podcast episode as I was driving. I said, hey, you know what? Let me tell my viewers that this is happening right now. This is really interesting. Go watch the episode. I think it'll be great for all of you, not just if you're a software engineering or into crypto or whatever, just in general, right? In terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of lessons, in terms of how to deal with haters and so on. So lots of good lessons there. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Like this video if you found value, subscribe if you're not, and I'll see you guys during the week in the next video. Thank you.